Cuba is an island country in the northern Caribbean. The Bahamas and Florida are located to the north of Cuba, Haiti to the east, Jamaica to the south, and Mexico to the west. With an area of about 110,000 square kilometers, Cuba is just the 104th largest country in the world, but it controls the largest island in the Caribbean. This means that Cuba is roughly the same size as Bulgaria, Iceland, or South Korea. Additionally, there are about 4,195 islands that belong to Cuba, but most of them are uninhabited. Even though Cuba certainly may not be the most attractive country to move to, Cuba still is a fascinating country I would like to take a deeper look into. The largest cities of Cuba are Havana, which is also Cuba's capital city, followed by Santiago de Cuba, Camagüey, and Holguin. All in all, Cuba is home to about 11.2 million people. However, Cuba's population is shrinking slowly. The official language of Cuba is Spanish, and its largest ethnic groups are European Cubans, with about 64%, followed by 26.6% of mixed African and European ancestry. About 60% are Christians, 35% do not identify with any religion, and 5.4% believe in different folk religions. Cuba is known for the socialist government, for its beaches. In fact, it has a coastline of over 5,600 kilometers. It is known for its architecture, its rum, cigars, classical American cars, for its unique flora and fauna we'll take a look at soon, for the Cuba crisis in the early 1960s, and for the welcoming and friendly locals. But as we will find out soon, Cuba has much more than that to offer. The flag consists of 5 horizontal stripes of equal size in the colors blue and white. On the left-hand side, the stripes are covered by a red equilateral triangle in which there is a white 5-pointed star. By the way, the star is not a symbol of communism, but the star is a symbol of independence. The flag of Puerto Rico is similar to the Cuban flag because the Puerto Rican independence movement against the Spanish colonial power was based on the Cuban War of Independence. Only the colors blue and red are swapped. The Cuban and Puerto Rican flags were used as inspiration to the Catalan Estelada, which is a symbol of the Catalan independence movement. The national flower of Cuba is the white mariposa, the national tree is the royal palm, the national bird is the Cuba trogon, and Cuba even has a national sport, which is baseball. By the way, the Cuban trogon only lives in Cuba, and its white, red and blue feathers match the colors of the flag. The currency of Cuba is the Cuban peso. Cuba has a planned economy, which means that most of the means of productions are owned and run by the government, and most of the labor force is employed by the state. However, the private sector is getting stronger and stronger. Since in 1981, the private economy employed about 8% of the workforce, whereas in 2006, 22% were employed in it. Today, government spending contributes to about 78% to the total GDP. Interestingly, every company that hires a Cuban must pay the Cuban government, which then pays the employee in Cuban pesos. The average monthly wage in 2013 was at about 466 Cuban pesos, or just about $19. Every Cuban household has a ration book entitling it to a monthly supply of food and other goods. The history of Cuba's economy is fascinating. Before Fidel Castro's revolution in 1959, Cuba was one of the most advanced and successful countries in Latin America. Havana was a, quote, glittering and dynamic city, and the economy was fueled by the sale of sugar to the US. As of the Cuban historian Luis Perez of the University of North Carolina, Havana was then what Las Vegas has become. Cuba had one of the highest per capita income, life expectancy, and one of the highest per capita ownership of automobiles. Cuba's literacy rate of 76% was the 4th highest in Latin America. Today, the literacy rate is one of the world's highest at 99.8%, and also Cuba has the most doctors per capita. That is why today Venezuela supplies Cuba with an estimated 110,000 barrels of oil per day in exchange for money and the services of 44,000 Cubans, most of them medical personnel in Venezuela. Cuba's national resources include sugar, tobacco, fish, citrus fruits, coffee, beans, rice and potatoes. One of the most significant mineral resources is nickel, accounting to 21% of all exports in 2011 and 4% of the world production. 15% of all exports are accounted to Cuban cigars and alcoholic beverages. The tourism industry is growing. In 2018, Cuba welcomed over 4.7 million tourists, which makes tourism one of the main sources of revenue. Because of US-Cuba tensions and travel restrictions, Canadians are the #1 visitors with over 1.1 million in 2018. Next comes the US, overseas Cubans, Italians, Germans and Russians. Overall, the Cuban economy is the world's 62nd largest and about the same size as the economy of Slovakia or Ethiopia. Its main export partners are Venezuela, Spain and Russia, whereas its largest import partners are China, Spain and Russia. What many people don't know is that Cuba was one of the first countries to include climate protection in its constitution and is the country with the highest percentage of women in parliament of all Central and South American countries. Later in this video there will be an interview with Ümit, who today not lives in Cuba but in Brazil. However, he knows the country very well since he has been visiting Cuba regularly since the year of 2000. He lived there with his Cuban wife and has traveled to every part of the country. Ümit will talk about his journey as well as provide useful information to people who are interested in moving to Cuba. If you have an idea which country I should cover next, please let me know down in the comments. This video is part of a video series that covers informative facts and the migration procedure of countless countries worldwide. I've created a dedicated video for many countries. You can find a playlist down in the video description. But let's return to Cuba. What are the main upsides of moving to Cuba and what needs to be considered? As of the 2019 UN report, Cuba has one of the lowest foreign-born populations worldwide. Just about 4,800 people living in Cuba were not born there but moved to this country during their lifetime. Many Cubans have Spanish roots, but some also have German, French, Portuguese, Italian and Russian roots. There are also some Haitians and Jamaicans, as well as Chinese, Koreans and Filipino living in Cuba. But what are the main upsides of moving to Cuba? Let us start by taking a closer look at the Cuban nature. Cuba is an archipelago of islands, which means that there are a lot of beaches that open all doors to activities related to the sea. Cuba has a warm tropical climate and also warm seawater from the equator, thanks to the Caribbean current. But Cuba is also threatened by hurricanes. About 1 to 2 hurricanes hit Cuba annually. The most deadly one was in 1932, when over 3,000 people died. Storms also regularly destroy houses and crops. But compared to Cuba's neighboring states, Cuba has a well-functioning civil protection system that is prepared for these hazards. In Havana, daily mean temperatures range from 22.2 degrees Celsius in January to about 28 degrees Celsius in August. However, temperatures can get up to 40 degrees Celsius. So if you prefer to live in a warmer climate, then Cuba might be a great destination for you to visit. The record low temperature in Havana was at 6 degrees Celsius. Moreover, there are only 80 days of rain a year in Havana and over 7.7 hours of sunshine a day. Compare that to Berlin's and London's 4.7 hours a day. Generally speaking, there is a dry season from November to April and a rainy season from May to October. Also, Cuba is home to the world's smallest bird, called bee hummingbird. It is just about 5.5 centimeters or 2.2 inches. 20% of Cuba is occupied by tropical rainforests. The country is hilly and mountainous. The highest point is the Pico Truquino, with a height of 1,974 meters above sea level. Another upside is the culture of Cuba. Even though there are only a few foreigners living in Cuba, the Cuban culture is influenced by many other countries such as Spain and different African cultures. The Cuban government offers free education to all and established sports, ballet, and music programs. The cuisine of Cuba is a mix of Spanish and Caribbean cuisines. A typical Cuban meal may consist of plantains, black beans, rice, ropa vieja, which is beef cut in a special way, Cuban bread, pork, onions, and tropical fruits. Garlic, oregano, and bay leaves are very common spices in Cuba. Traditional Cuban meals are not served in courses, but are served all at the same time. Unlike in other Latin American countries, baseball is the most common sport in Cuba. Other popular sports are volleyball, boxing, basketball, and water sports. In general, Cubans are considered smart, educated, and warm people. Cubans love to spend time outside to socialize, which is why there is always something going on in the neighborhood. Cuba offers a very vivid social culture, as many Cubans are outgoing. People have the ability to tackle problems with the limited resources they have and find creative solutions to challenges they face. Another nice feature about Cuba is the fact that you will find many old Russian and American cars. If you are an old-timer enthusiast, Cuba has a lot for you to offer. Last but not least, the low cost of living is an upside. But the living costs are actually not as low as one might think. If you live off $3,000 a month in Miami, Florida, you will need about $1,580 for the same quality of life in Havana. This means that the cost of living in Havana is more than 47% less than living in Miami. And living in rural areas is of course even cheaper. But in spite of all these upsides, there are also some drawbacks when it comes to moving to Cuba. First of all, an authoritarian socialist government controls the country, which means that ownership is severely restricted. As usual in socialist systems, the state is not only fed up, but also intervenes massively in the economy and even dominates it, as we mentioned previously. Cubans can set up private companies, but as soon as the company does too well, the state will force it to close. As someone who is interested in moving to Cuba, this means that your personal freedoms are severely restricted in this country. Internet is very limited, slow and censored. All kinds of electronic equipment is very expensive and you won't find a great variety of products to buy. Even though healthcare is good for locals, as a foreigner you will need to pay a lot. The US has no diplomatic ties with Cuba, which is a severe drawback in case you are a US citizen. You won't get any support from the US government if you get in trouble. Let us continue with interviewing Ümit. Ümit, when did you move to Cuba and which city did you move to?
The first time I visited Cuba in 2000 and I was a student. I traveled 4 weeks as a backpacker from Havana to Santiago de Cuba and back. So I saw the whole country and could see the differences. When the next year, in 2001, I met a semester. I studied a semester at the University of Havana as I was studying international business and management from my university in Germany. I moved there to Havana and lived with a Cuban family. I rented a room and was living in a Cuban family and also met my ex-wife there. I lived with her together in their house. So I lived like a Cuban in 2001 and since and I went to until 2011. I went every year to Cuba and I know very well Cuba and Cuban culture and Cuban lifestyle.
Why did you choose Cuba?
Cuba. So actually, I never planned to go to Cuba. It was proposed by my university Spanish teacher. Would you like to go in Cuba and study a semester? I said, okay, it's a totally different country. I never traveled outside of Europe. And as I was learning Spanish and wanted to study abroad, I thought of other countries, maybe Spain or Chile. But Cuba, she did have contacts and asked me if you want to be a pioneer student and go there. I said, okay, I will be pioneer. And I went to Cuba and it has totally changed my life and opened up totally my horizon. As you know, it's a socialist country and it's a different kind of government, regulations and everything. It was like a totally different experience you can't have in other countries, like maybe in the former Soviet Union countries or Eastern Germany, or maybe today like in North Korea. So I was very curious, and it was an experience I never wanted to miss.
What did you enjoy most about your life in Cuba?
I was impressed by the people. They are so poor; they don't even have $1 per day, but they make the best out of their life. They live in the here and now. They don't worry too much, They don't worry about the past too much. They don't worry about the future. They think only today, what I'm going to eat this evening, for example. So it's meat is very expensive and difficult to buy. There it's regulated everything, and they have a quota, a libretta, where they can pick up once a month, a chicken or meat, very cheap, but it's so low quantity. So most of the people miss eating meat, but they are not depressed because of this. They accept what is and make the best out of it. So we can learn a lot from Cubans. They would like to have our problems in Western countries like in Germany, Switzerland, or USA. For them, our problems are not real problems. They have real basic problems. What I'm going to eat this evening? Always rice and beans. It's not the solution. But in general, they eat very healthy. And Cubans are very healthy. They have not these civilization diseases. They are not overweighted, and they have also very good medical service for free from the state. So this is very well developed in this case.
What did you miss most about your life in Germany?
If you're used to be able to consume what you want whenever you want, you will have problems. You will suffer. So in Germany, Switzerland, or other Western countries, you can buy whatever you want. You go to a big store and you have everything. And you don't have big stores in Cuba. There are small shops, and you can't buy everything. The shelves are empty. For example, you have lots of money in your pocket, and you go to a market. You want to buy meat because you want to cook meat. They don't have it. Or you want to buy yogurt. They don't have it. Today, don't have it. You come tomorrow. Or chicken or whatever. It's also you buy what they have and you cook it, and you can go to some restaurants. But the level is not the same like maybe in some tourist resorts. And I heard many people also complaining about the service quality in the restaurants and so on, that the food was cold and so on. You should not be surprised. These people don't earn lots of money, so they are not so motivated like in the capitalist system, serving very well and making a career. It's not an option. Everybody is equal. It doesn't matter if you're a physician or a doctor or if you're a taxi driver. Everybody's almost equal. Everybody's equal poor, let me say it like this. They are poor economically, materialistic way, but they are not poor. They are much richer from their mindset, how to cope with problems in the day-to-day life.
What advice would you give people who are interested in moving to Cuba?
Yeah, so you have to really burn for Cuba. You have to love Cuba. Maybe you have a partner there, you want to live there, but you have to be prepared with your mindset mentally that you will have pain points which will make you suffer. Like some points I have explained before. If you want to live, make money, make sure that you make your money outside of Cuba. You can't make money in Cuba. Best case, you are hired by a company, non-Cuban company. Actually, it's always a joint venture company. If a European company, for example, wants to found a sister company there, it has to be always a joint venture, 50%. And so you can be a manager there and can have a good lifestyle. I have a friend of mine from Spain. He is a general manager of a Spanish company there, or Spanish joint venture, and he has a good lifestyle. So, but if not, it will be difficult to make money in Cuba. Every option you would find would be half illegal, because as the system it's not well seen if you use capitalistic techniques and make lots of money. If you run, for example, a small restaurant, it's limited to a certain capacity, and if it's too successful, I've seen with my own eyes, for example, a pizza store, it has been closed. It was very popular. They invent just a reason, and because they see they make too much money, they don't accept. So they keep everything somehow suppressed. They find always an argument, they did not pay, whatever. So it's limited. Be prepared for this.
Thank you, Ümit, for taking time to join this interview. Please make sure to check out his YouTube channel, linked in the description below, for more informative videos about his life in Brazil now. What needs to be done in order to move to Cuba? Visitors to Cuba must obtain a visa before travel or a tourist card from one of the Cuban diplomatic missions. Cuba has an extensive global diplomatic presence and is the Latin American country with the second highest number of diplomatic missions after Brazil, which is quite impressive for such a small country. Citizens of Russia, Malaysia and the United Arab Emirates, Kenya and some more countries in Southeastern Europe are able to visit Cuba visa-free for a maximum of 90 days. People from Belarus, Mongolia and some Caribbean countries for 30 days. There also is a student visa to study at one of Cuba's universities and a personal visa for family reunification. In the video description you will find a link to a webpage with more information about the visa types Cuba has to offer.